So basically, what you're talking about is it's basically what Islam kind of instills as a redistribution of wealth. Like something like this would not happen, where a small minority own more than half of the human population with their wealth. Right? Am I correct to say that? Yeah. So this, I mean, some people say, okay, well, it seems like, it kind of like seems like a socialist economic system, right? I think that's what you're alluding to, probably, Brother Khurram.
Yeah, I actually wanted to know, maybe everybody here can shed light on that, is what is, as Brother mentioned, Islam calls for a fair economic system. What is that fair economic system like? And what's the difference between Islamic economic system and capitalism and communism?
Right.
What's the major difference?
Right. So, I mean, that's a great question, and it's one that we have to kind of set up, is that the capitalist and communist economic systems they're man-made systems. So that on that spectrum, they always go between left and right, right? So what I was trying to allude to earlier is that Islam doesn't neatly fit in one or the other, right? So on the one hand, Islam does not allow price controls, as I mentioned in that narration, but at the same time, it allows for the common ownership of wealth. So someone who would look at that superficially would say that, if you just look at the common ownership aspect, you would say, well, this is socialistic, right? Whereas if you would look at the lack of price controls, you'd say this is capitalistic, right? What I would say is that the primary difference is that, first of all, Islam looks to harness the natural productivity of people. And then what it does is that it ensures that there's a distribution of wealth automatically through the application of the rules, right? So a couple of the key things that distinguish it from capitalism is that, as we know, is the prohibition of interest, and a little lesser known prohibition, which is the prohibition on stock markets, right? So what this does is, when you look at the current system, what is one of the key mechanisms by which the wealth is concentrated and doesn't distribute is through the stock ownership. So, for example, if you look at someone like Tyson Foods, one of the ways that when Don Tyson was looking to expand his company, and he was someone who survived the Great Depression, and he was wondering as to how to do this because he was burning through his operating capital. And so what he decided to do was to do an initial public offering, right? So what he decided to do is to essentially buy out the market. And he actually says that this is an expand or expire strategy, where what he'll do is just acquire the competition, and thereby he's immune to the market, right? And so what has happened now is, because with capitalism, whether it's through bonds or stock or other what they call investment vehicles, essentially what happens is the big companies are able to buy out the market, and the market ceases to be something that governs people in general, right? So what Islam effectively does, from an implication point of view, it prevents money from becoming an industry on its own, right? And so this is its primary sort of distinguishment from capitalism when it comes to the what is called the capital markets. Essentially, through different ahkam, it abolishes those capital markets. And so therefore, the rich person, when he's rich, the way he can get richer is through either direct investment, where he invests in his own businesses, still being subject to the market. Going back to Don Tyson, is that if he couldn't have done the IPO, then the chicken prices would have dictated how much wealth he had, right? Or what he would have to do is partner with other people, right? So he could do partnership structures, but the partnership structures would be equal footing. So if there's a rich person with all the wealth and a person with no wealth, an entrepreneur, when they come into the business, they both have equal say when it comes to that business, right? So just because he's the wealthy, he can't dictate all the terms, right? So there's a more equal footing. Now, of course, because he's wealthy, he definitely will have more say. But when it comes to the ijab and qabul, or the offer and acceptance, which goes into forming the company, just like in a marriage, the partner, which is called mudaraba, where there's a partner who has just a partner in body, doesn't have any wealth he puts in the business, he has a say. Now, what's interesting, what Islam does is, because really the rich person has no choice but to find the best entrepreneurs. So like you see like a good sort of approximation would be like something like Dragon's Den. I don't know if you've seen that show, where the rich people, they'll try to find entrepreneurs, right? Is that's the only place where they can get their money to grow. And one of the reasons they would do that is for self-interested reasons, because they know themselves are not the best people. There might be smarter people out there who know how to grow the money, right? So they'll have to partner on equal footing. They might be able, depending on the negotiation, how the profit gets split will depend on that, on who is better able to negotiate. But the point is that if they want their money to grow, they would have to search out the best entrepreneurs, and they'd be vying with the other people of wealth for those entrepreneurs, right?
Okay. So in other words, are you saying that Islam promotes some kind of a controlled capitalism kind of system? Can we say that, or would that be wrong?
I would say the way I say you have entrepreneurial system without capitalism, right? Because capitalism goes from an Aqidah perspective. They believe in the freedom of ownership, right? Whereas we do not believe in the freedom of ownership. We believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can tell us how to run the system, right? And so from an ideological perspective, if someone is a pure capitalist person, a thinker would look at Islam, would not say this is capitalism, right? Just like a socialist person would look at Islam and say this is not socialism. Because we believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the owner of the wealth, for example, something even basic like that, takes us out of the fold of the secular thinking, where they don't uphold such things. Because on the other side of it, there is a distributive aspect of wealth. You see, like, with what's happening in the States, that even like a modest kind of wealth tax is seen as something that they're trying to fight. Like some of the politicians on the Democratic side of the fence are advocating for modest wealth taxes, and they're being fought because this infringes on their freedom of ownership, right? So they believe that when they have their wealth, don't touch the wealth. Let's talk about income taxes. Let's not talk about wealth tax, right?
Right. So on one hand, we have this spiritual aspect of the economic system where, as you mentioned it, everything is owned by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we are trustees of that wealth. And then on the other hand, as I understand what you just said, it's more like a mixture of capitalism and communism. So you're taking the good aspects from both these systems. Is that true?
I wouldn't say that. It's that Islam stands on its own 2 feet, and I think that's very important. Is what I advocate, for example, is using the economic system as a way to invite non-Muslims to Islam, right? Because what it is that Islam, if there was no communism and capitalism, a jurist would come up with the same conclusions based on him studying the evidences, regardless of the environment. That is, in Islam, what the thinking leads the action, and we're not influenced by our environment, right? That the hadith and the Quran, all the things all the policies I'm advocating for are influenced by the texts themselves, not necessarily the environment. Like, we all know that interest is haram, right? But there's more to it than that. As I've talked to the brothers before. For example, we have the gold and silver standard, right? Which is something that's based on ijtihad, right? Which is based on the study of the evidences, right? So Islam does stand on its own 2 feet, and it's precisely because its power to build a consensus comes from the fact it's from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? Because as I mentioned, that even though you and I are decent people and we don't want to do harm to people, if you and I sat down and tried to build a system that was beneficial to anyone, because of our limitations, we simply couldn't do that because we don't have foresight like that. Whereas Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who made the universe, who made us, made human beings, made men, women, made rich people, made poor people, made these concepts, He knows how to best to regulate our things. And that's the fact the solution comes from the text is what makes it makes it acceptable.
So I guess it would be safe to say that, because like in terms of formalization of communism and capitalism actually came after Islam, right? Because the Islamic system itself was already there and it was being practiced. So I think it would be incorrect. It would be kind of incorrect to say that. Okay, so later on when we look at the Islamic system, it's a combining or a mixture of communism and capitalism, which would be actually incorrect, because formalization of these two systems came later anyways, right? The Islamic system came beforehand, and it was actually practiced as well, successfully. I mean, one could look at it when we're looking at history.